Hello, this is Dale Matthews. It's Inside News, and tonight we have Mike Jones and Clinton Chard with us. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello, Dale. Yeah, I have some chard planted in my garden this year.
Yes.
It's not Clinton chard.
Before.
It's the Swiss variety, but you know.
Yeah, never heard that one before.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
You are an original.
I'm sure you haven't. Yes. Okay.
As you see, Mike is reporting from the bright side of the bridge, and Clinton is reporting from the dark side of the moon.
Yes. Right.
That is correct.
So, as I'd mentioned in previous nights, we've been having somebody come on at the beginning of each show and talk a little bit about what you think about the current election and where it's going to lead and what's next. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Clinton?
Well, let's see. We've got the two commissioner races, and I'm not very happy with the results, but it's not unexpected. We've got position 1, or position 2, I apologize, and that's going to be Keith Heck and Dan DeYoung.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's like Keith is asleep at the wheel, and so they wanted either that or they wanted a city person, a city council person in. So I don't know. I think this is a bad idea. I'm very concerned about the statist agenda that has been pushed through the city, bleeding into the county. We don't want city-style governance out here in the county. I want independence.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think that that the majority of the county wanted that either. But I listened to some very, I think, sane analysis of the election situation, and essentially what happened there was you had the non-establishment. There was too many non-establishment candidates and two establishment candidates in that, and so what happened is that you can count on the city is going to vote like the city does, and the county is going to vote like the county does. But here's the problem with independent-minded people. Is that they go, well, I'm voting for so-and-so, and you've got 5 independent-minded people, and they're all voting for some different candidate. I mean, it's sad that in order to get self-reliant, individuals, you have to get them to somehow act as a group instead of being fractured amongst 10 or 15 candidates. You had, 5 to 7% across, 5 other candidates, and the 2 establishment candidates. Well, listen, if you even combine them together, that's 40% of the vote. There's still 60% left,
Right. Unfortunately, we don't have a vote for none of the above as a standard candidate, which is what I did with all of my judges. I wrote none to oppose them running unopposed.
Yeah. That's another thing, Clinton, that bothers me, is that when I go in and I see all these judges, and I feel very guilty for not knowing who these people are and what sort of agendas they have. Wolke, I know him because we were in his courtroom one time, and I saw him be illogical, so I can't vote for him ever. Right. I don't know most of these other people, and this is.
What was the judge that just reversed the GMO ban we had?
That was Wolke.
Okay, so and he ran opposed, so we're going to have him for another term, right?
No, he's running next time.
Oh, he's running next time.
Next
time. Pardon me. Yeah. Pardon me.
Yeah. Lindy Baker was the one that ran out opposed this time.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it's unfortunate. I am fond of lecturing people for, living up to their civic responsibility, and yet I open the page of the voters pamphlet and look at it and go, Yeah, I don't know anything about these people, and they don't make a public campaign most of the time. Every once in a while, you'll see a judge, doing a public campaign, and so they sort of have to put themselves out there or present themselves in a certain way. But other than that, we don't know who these people are, and they're very important.
Well, even if we do know who they are, the wrong ones still get voted in. We got a guy that's going up in the primary. He said that little IT people are little moles that sneak around. Are you kidding me? He has no respect for others. Doesn't even care to know their names or their positions. It just bothers me that the public would support such a fellow.
Well, they haven't been paying attention. That's the thing about Keith. I was shocked about that too. But you know what? I think that people who are really engaged are probably less than 100, and people that are somewhat familiar with, because maybe they tune into the show every once in a while, or they look into it themselves. They watch one of the weekly business sessions online occasionally. Then you've got but this is a small number in terms of the voting citizens. This is it's a small number of people.
Right. Any other thoughts there, Clinton, before we let you go?
On position 3, my favorite, of course, was Ronald Smith, due to his land issues and his support for the State of Jefferson effort, of which I'm on the committee for. I'm very concerned that either Bill Hunker or Lily Morgan, especially Lily, will not be supportive. She said at a meeting I attended with her, I asked her directly, would she support the State of Jefferson if a petition came across her desk, and she said only if the people wanted it. So her heart's not in it. She would just give lip service, I would believe. So
I was there when you asked her that. So.
And that was my feeling coming from it. She just was lukewarm. Yeah.
Well,
constitutional values are not necessarily on her agenda. Pardon me.
Right. We appreciate you joining us to tell us your opinions about this. We will have more people on at the beginning of our show over the next week or so that folks that that are knowledgeable about these subjects can come on and say their point of view. Thank you for joining us, sir.
You're welcome. And just one thing, look for us. We have a parade at the Boatneck. We're going to be in it, and we're going to wave our flags and say hi to everybody. So come out to the Boatneck parade and give us your support.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Do you have a website, real quick? Do you have a website for your effort?
Yes, the State of Jefferson effort is on SOJ51.net. That's Sierra Oscar Juliet 51.net.
Okay.
21 counties have already joined the effort in California. They've submitted their declarations of independence, or not independence, but independence from California, all on the basis of representation. They do not have a senator for it's all based on population, just like we have it here in Oregon. And as you can see, we are getting outvoted by Multnomah County, and Willamette County, and all of them up there. So we need representation down here as well.
Thank you again for your time, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks,
guys, and have a great day.
So, Mike, what we'll do here is Congressman Walden was in the area today. He was having a town hall at the Ann Basker Auditorium. So I went over there and sat right up front, and somewhere behind me stood up Joseph Rice and asked him a question. And so here we'll start out with questions from the audience, led in this case by Joseph Rice.
Proposed Walden scenic withdrawal from Lost Creek to the confluence of the Applegate, massive impact to homeowners, administratively withdrawn 101,000 acres of the Illinois Valley. I can't take my 11-year-old daughter. This is how you pan for gold. They did not even follow the legal process. They're just doing it. in the economy of Josephine County, we are getting constrained and squeezed to poverty because we cannot use the natural resources. We've developed a museum mentality, look but don't touch. Sugar Pine Mine a year ago, frustration boiled over. Those miners still waiting for administrative process. We watched what happened in Harney County, again, frustration boiling over about land use issues. The federal government has detained over 100 people. They've been charged, not convicted. They're spending 23 hours a day in solitary confinement when some were transported from Oregon to Nevada, 2 days without food, 24 hours chained to a bench, and then when in a jail cell, chained to a bed in a jail cell. When I was in Afghanistan and deported and transported detainees, Taliban, we treated them 10 times better than we're treating American citizens exercising their constitutional rights. Freedom of speech, redress of grievance. This all seems to be systemic of BLM action. How do we push back? How do we fight back using the system? Josephine County can't even get them to coordinate to consensus. They don't even return the calls or show up as they're mandated doing the policy. We, the people, what do? This is a powder keg and the fuse is lit. How do we stop it before another Sugar Pine or Harney County or something else happens with this agency? Yeah.
Mike, I'm really personally much more interested in the questions from the audience than I am in from answers from a politician. We will go to his.
Okay, but for crying out loud, I mean, the answer to that question, I mean, if he did answer it in any substantive manner, is I would have liked to hear it.
Well, we're going to hear it. Okay, I wondered what your response would be. Here we go.
Well, the first thing is, and I've worked really hard on this, is to get the president not to declare a new national monument out in Malheur County. I was out in Jordan Valley, did a town hall on a Sunday afternoon. Usually I get 8 or 10 people. I mean, there's only about 200 people in Jordan Valley. I came around the corner after having lunch, and the pickup's half a mile on each side of the road. There were 350 people at the school, and it went for 2 hours. They don't want the monument either. They just voted 90-10 against it. I've conveyed that to Secretary of Interior, Secretary of Agriculture, and the president himself, both in writing and in person. And I think where this really breaks down is where people in the local communities feel like nobody's listening to them in the government.
Right.
That's true. We can agree and disagree about things, but if you feel like you didn't have a fair opportunity to participate, that's where I get really frustrated. You saw that spill out on the House floor. We're still fighting over a couple of those issues, although as a result of the dust up in Harney County, the Secretary of Interior backed off on the fencing issue I raised, and they're actually now proceeding as the law that I helped write, told them to do in the beginning. We're now fighting them on an access issue, which is just as stupid. And so we've got to keep the pressure on. Now, you do have to be careful not to cross certain lines too, though. I mean, you can't do what some of those guys did and not be in violation of the law. And we're going to be a country of laws. And so we have to have some restraint here. And so it's one of those we're fighting every day on. We're fighting with every appropriation bill. We're fighting every avenue I've got to try and get back to where it's the public land. It's not the federal government's land, it's the public's land. And now we don't want abuse out there. I mean, there's, nobody's advocating that either, by the way. Are there abusers? Yeah, of course. I mean, there's somebody that's going to do something stupid. But that's not what we're about. We just, as Oregonians, we just want to recreate and access and do the kinds of things you're talking about. And we've got to get back to that position, this issue on Steens Mountain. When we wrote the Steens Mountain Cooperative Management and Protection Act and Clinton signed it into law, we tried to protect and preserve the traditional things that went on in the mountain, including that if you had land up there, you had historical access to it. I had a BLM person right now in this war with me saying that she wants to know how often somebody went to that piece of land, because that would be the historical access. We know what that is. That's just a nuisance and limitation, and that was never the intent. Fortunately, this issue came up, 8 or 10 years ago, and Gordon Smith and Ron Wyden and I all doubled down on what our intent was, since we were all part of writing the law. It says, no, you get free to come and go. That's what historical intent meant to us. And so they've got one of the environmental groups on to pushing them, saying, oh, no, this is how often you went, and they're afraid they can't justify open access in court. So it's like, really? So I'm pounding them pretty hard, both BLM and.
Can you fund certain parts of their activity?
Well, here's how the Constitution works. We have power to person the House. Yes, that's where that only means that's where they start. But that, in order to take any action specific, you have to get that into law. That requires the president and the Senate. So some of these things we have been able to make some progress on. Delisting the wolves, some sage grouse prevention, things like that, we could hold in between the Senate, the House, and get the president, force him to sign it. But I gotta tell you, we start with a laundry list about this high from the Western members like myself, say no monument, none of this, and then you gotta negotiate with the Senate and then the president finally. And so that you start with a big list, you get down to a much smaller one. Then you come back this year and we've got a whole nother list we're working on.
Can we look county by county and putting in like a roundtable group that can bring to your office what are the top impact priorities and start working on some of that to take it to the agency? Because part of it is the coordination. Their policy mandates them to show up and they just don't. How do you get them to follow their own policy?
It's always a struggle. We work on that a lot with all kinds of agencies, not just BLM. We had a floodplain issue out in Milton Free Water, and they couldn't get, I don't remember if it was FEMA or the Corps or both, out to Milton Free Water. You can, because you got to remember, it's much shorter for you to drive from Milton Free Water to Seattle than for people in Seattle to come to Milton Free Water. And so I pulled together a meeting with the community, and we got representatives from each agency there. And the issue there was on the levee. The Corps was saying, you got to get all this vegetation off the levee because the roots of the trees are kicking the rocks out and we're losing the levee. And the FEMA was involved, and then one of the Fish and Wildlife was involved, saying, no, we need the shade for the fish, for da-da-da-da-da. Well, as it ended up, out of that beginning sort of confrontation meeting, they created a new national standard where they can both go together. What a concept, and say, take this one, leave that one. Yeah. This won't cause destruction and degradation of the levee. That's fine. This does. I mean, it's not. It shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah, I get it.
It is. So,
just along that vein, I think I'm reading the news from the Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities. They had the Local Management Act hearing in the House Natural Resources Subcommittee,
right,
trying to encourage something as far as local coordination.
Yeah.
I know this board has probably been as active as any I've ever seen in trying to get that locally with the BLM and the Forest Service, because we got a lot of issues with the.
And remember when President Bush was there, we passed the Healthy Forest Restoration Act. We created the wildfire community planning process. There was a collaborative process among citizens in the community. If they got together with others and the agencies and you developed a wildfire planning process, then within the wildland urban interface, you could define what that was. And most of our counties said that's countywide. And then you didn't have to go through as many hoops in NEPA to go do the work. So we were able to get that in, but I gotta have partners that will help us get that into things like that into law. And that's the White House and that's the Senate. As you know, we've had bipartisan legislation on forestry 3 years in a row, pass the House overwhelmingly and go into the great beyond in the Senate. And we're hopeful now that they're finishing up the energy bill, they'll take up forestry next. But we've got to change these things for our own. We're supposed to be good stewards of these land. That doesn't mean let them burn up and then walk away, right? So, yeah.
I just kind of speak to that.
Yeah.
Best stewards are private property owners. And my hope is that if there's a President Trump and the Republicans have the Senate and the House, you can take advantage to really shake it up. Because here in Joseph County, over 70% of the land is exempt from the property tax.
Right.
And if it was subject to the property tax being private property, we would have plenty for the Sheriff's Department. We wouldn't have to worry about BLM following their own procedures because it would be private property. And I really hope that this happens. And then 7 years ago, the Democrats had all three, and they forced Obamacare down the throats of everybody else. That was a bad thing. But more private property would make states like Oregon, which are only about 47% private property, get closer to Rhode Island, 99%, Connecticut, 99% private property. That's the root of the problem. You can make history if you don't make that happen.
So,
So I think there may only be one state east of the Mississippi River that has more than 9 or 10% federal land. And this is, by the way, look it up on the maps. Yep.
Say that again?
I think there's only maybe one state east of the Mississippi
East, okay.
that has
West, it's like 65% average.
I might be, if you include Alaska.
Alaska's got 90%.
Right, and so, and Nevada and all, you could, but the problem becomes the political one and the numeric one. If you think about it, Montana has 1 vote in the House. Wyoming has 1 vote in the House. Idaho has 2 votes in the House, you know. Utah has 4. LA probably has 30. You know, I mean, we're just outgunned. And so we're trying. So I was actually in the meeting with Mr. Trump 2 weeks ago, and which I found very interesting. He was very businesslike, and I thanked him for his comments in Lane County where he talked about needing to deal with this forestry issue. So I actually got some time with him. More than I've had with a bum, is that my outer voice? To talk about forestry issues and kind of, we got to start over and he was very interested, so, you know, we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
Further on that.
Yeah.
The Constitution only gives the federal government the right to have property for certain specified things, not 65% or 90% of the state. And when you go west of the Mississippi, it's not been conformed to the Constitution, correct?
I think that's in dispute, and there have been cases.
Why is it in dispute?
Because courts have ruled differently than what you're arguing. So, I mean,
well, that's true of anything that
well, okay,
you interpret the Constitution the way you want to interpret the Constitution.
Yeah,
but if you read the Constitution verbatim, that's what it says.
Right. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but judges have ruled on this in courts of law, and so. Yeah. And remember, most of this land out here started as under federal government control. So when the West was. You know, there are things like Louisiana Purchase, there were things like that, the federal government, Seward's falling, the federal government bought Alaska from the Russians. So, I mean, the point though is, how do we get to where we can get better management and better input locally? That's what we have to get to, Cheryl.
Aren't you asking? Just this last week, we had our primary election, and Measure 1772, which was an advisory question put on by the Board of County Commissioners in regard to the Rogue River proposal for the designation of wild and scenic from Applegate up to the Lost Creek Dam. And that comes under, I think, a public law that was in 1963, I think, for the wild and scenic rivers. But anyway, the Josephine County voters said no, they did not want that by almost 69%. And the yes vote was 31%. And I have a copy of this for you if you'd like to have it for any of your discussions back there in DC in regards to what do the people really want.
Yep.
I have a couple of other issues, if you don't mind. I know that there's been some talk about delisting marijuana from the drug schedule as a dangerous drug. And then the other one is I would like to request, and I can put this in writing to you later, I've been talking to a lot of women, they call women veterans. However, a lot of women do not claim themselves or do not designate themselves as women on women veterans on applications for different things. That has come out of some studies here in Oregon. Why? We don't know why, but they will answer that they have had prior military service with the United States government, but they will not claim as being a veteran, which is really an odd thing. We don't really get to the bottom of that. So what we're requesting, and we're going to be working on this with the state Veterans Office, is to change all those forms. You know how they say, are you a veteran of the military type of thing, where you check the box? A lot of women don't. But they will check the box that says, have you served in the United States military?
So
it's really an odd semantics, but.
Well, there is a confusion about like retired military and who's a veteran, who's not a veteran in a technical sense. So maybe that's.
So we need to work on that language somehow, because some women are not getting the benefits that they're entitled to. And I know here in the fall that I'm planning with the State Veterans Department to have some kind of a meeting, an informative educational type of program for women's veterans, as well as departments and agencies agencies within the county.
Let us know when you're doing that. I'd be happy to send somebody from the office.
Great.
I have several veterans on the staff, including one in Bend who is in the Wounded Warrior program for the House. Margie, it'd be great to come over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. Grants Pass, Denny Stahl, Senior Pastor at Calvary Chapel. On Sunday morning, our 2 services we gathered about 150 signatures on a petition to implore the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, to do something to protect children all across this country, especially here in Oregon. As you know, on May 13th, the Education Department, the Justice Department, on the behest of the Obama administration, basically said that schools all across America, in order to protect their funding, have to provide access to locker rooms, bathrooms, et cetera, to transgender students. Little known, I think, is the fact that on April 21st, some 3 weeks before that, there was a meeting in Eugene where the school districts came together to be kind of briefed from the PACE people, the people that handle liability insurance for the school districts, regarding this issue. And the attorney in Portland basically said, they've got a big stick, and if you don't comply, you're going to bludgeon your budgets. And of course, as you know, all of our school districts are stressed. Yeah. So I just love to hear your comments and what you think Congress could do or should do about this issue. Thank you.
And if you have your petition or whatever, I'd be happy to get it directly to Paul.
I'll get it to you.
Yeah, that'd be fine. You know, we play whack-a-mole with this administration on their executive order, and this is just, this is just another one. Right?
Yes, sir.
Hey, a number of interesting topics being covered there. I couldn't help but feel when I'm watching him talk about how, we have these list of things, objections to things that administrative organizations of government are laying on people, and here's what we want to deal with, and then we compromise down to this little teeny thing there. First of all, I'd wonder, what have you gotten from them lately? But ultimately, if these things are objectionable to the people, why are we compromising on them with administrative bureaucracies? I mean, the BLM, it rules by rules and not by law. It has administrative authority, but it's and so these lawmakers, you can't even get enough of these people lined up together to see what the problem is here, to put a stop to 1 or 2 or 3 things.
Well, this is why by the end of this meeting, I walked out of there saying to myself that for tonight's show, to play this back, I'm really much more interested. I mean, you want to hear what the guy has to say, but I'm really much more interested in what are the important issues to our population than I am to these kind of answers, because the answers are all pretty much the same. Well, we're working on it. Well, we've drawn up a list of things. Well, no, nothing's happening with that list, but we continue to draw up another list. Oh, let me have your list of 150 people from Josephine County, Oregon, who don't like the idea of bisexual bathrooms. Really?
Yeah.
And Paul Ryan do something with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I did think it was interesting, oddly enough, that Cheryl stepped up and gave the results of the question that was on the ballot, and I think that is good information for those people to know, because oddly enough, congressmen and senators, when they go back there, for some reason, they lose track of what it is the people actually think.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you can give them a piece of paper every once in a while that says, hey, this is a result of, a recent as accurate as you're going to get poll that says these people don't want this, wild and scenic designation for this. I think that's good. They ought to do that on more stuff.
Yes, give them more information. Okay, we're about to go into a little thing. It's going to happen in a few seconds. Sitting right behind me was Roy Lindsay and the head of the radio station, Carl Wilson. They were right behind me.
Right.
And at one point, and you and some people in the audience may disagree. At one point, someone says something about how, when you got these transgender bathrooms in the high schools, why, what's to prevent some high school boys from rethinking what their sexuality is, and then they insist on going into the girls' room? Now, does anybody really remember, I do, what it was like in high school? Can you imagine that high school boys, maybe with the exception of a couple of members of the football team who were pretty confident in themselves, high school boys deciding that they're going to pretend to be transgender in order to work their way into the girls' bathroom?
Actually, I don't think that's a far-fetched scenario, because the thing is, it would be different in a circumstance that didn't take blocks out of their way. The thing is right now it says, hey, you claim that, you identify as a female, you get to go in there. You get to have locker rooms in the same locker room with the girls if that's who you are. And I think we need a little more criteria.
I'm going back to high school in my mind here.
Okay.
The vice principal of the high school is usually a pretty burly guy, often without hair, right? I mean, these are tough guys. And the principal is usually about half as tough. And the football coach and other coaches and the coaches for the girls' teams are tough as nails in most cases, right? And some of the girls, when I went to high school, they're pretty tough too. So you've got some guys who think, well, this is a lark. I'm going to pretend among all of my football buddies to be transgender, and I'm going to go into the girls. First of all, these girls would chase them out of there and beat them up, some of them football players. Second, the vice principal, the PTA, these other people would be all over these guys. This little rebellion of theirs would last about a second and a half. In high school, do you remember that it wasn't really a time of supreme confidence in yourself?
Listen, I understand what you're saying, but what you're talking about is a sane world. We're now entering a world where you can't say anything about that. That guy's transgender. He has rights. Get off his back. And you're surrounded by a bunch of people nailing you with this. You can't. This is a different world than it was when we were going to school.
This election notwithstanding, I have confidence that people of common sense are going to choose what's best for them. Okay, and
I hope so.
And what I think would happen with just social pressure in high school today, I understand your point. Social pressure in high school today, there would be so much pressure on these boys to think they're going to pretend in front of their friends to be transgender so they get a 10-second view.
And listen,
their chances of survival are about this big.
Yeah, okay, point taken. But there may well be some people that have legitimate conflict about whether or not they are transgendered, and I don't even want those guys going in the girls' bathroom and being what is that? What is that?
I understand you now. When I was living in Montgomery County, Maryland, the community I was in, for reasons unknown, was pretty considered to be pretty wealthy. Okay, I didn't live in the wealthy part, but that's where I worked. And they had a gathering after school one evening of students that had been abused by their parents. Okay, abused or by relatives. Now. In high school, you're not going to want to be seen going to one of these things. You may not want to be seen by your parents or by your relatives for going to that. But certainly, the rumor mill would be, they had to schedule a second and a third night because they had so many people show up. And that's in high school. So many students show up for this. Okay. So what I'm trying to
that seems counter to your argument, though.
It does seem counter to what I'm trying to say is that that's for sexual abuse and showing up at such a thing. So there is a difference I'm agreeing with you. There is a difference in the culture in which we live today, but I never would have thought such a thing would happen. What I'm trying to say is that if there's a legitimate reason, according to whatever definition I may cook up about what's legitimate, maybe that kind of thing would happen. But the idea that some high school boys will get together and decide to, wear a dress or something just so they can go to the girls' room, yes, they're pretty sophomoric in their attitudes in high school. Many of them are, but that's going to take an awful lot of resolve to work your way around all of those social obstacles in high school.
Okay, and I totally get that. However, this is not completely just applying to schools. Now we're talking about a lot of pressure that's being put on corporations. Target is entering into this situation here. There have been a number of things in the news just in the last week where men have been arrested after assaulting in some way somebody else of an opposite sex in a bathroom that they entered under the
I don't think they need that excuse in order to be able to do that, because that kind of thing's been happening for generations.
Understood, but the thing is that they can walk in and no one is supposed to question them as to, wait a minute, sir, what are you doing?
Yes.
I identify with, I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry for having questioned your right to go into that bathroom. And then you have to walk away and then something happens, I just think we never, ever had this problem before. What is the big deal? Why now do we have to
Target that think that they're going to have that in their, people will just, they'll vote with their feet. They'll go somewhere.
They have. Yeah, they have. Their stock prices dropped by a couple of $1 billion of net worth. So they're
the third bathroom. That's another kind of thing altogether.
Right. Yes, but
marketing purposes, that would be much smarter for them to do. And Josephine,
absolutely. Well, right. Absolutely. If that's something that you want to do, more power to you. This is a decision that's being made privately, but this is a situation where we're talking about a no. If I'm sure that women and men don't see each other the same way in terms of them being in one another's bathrooms, a woman probably feels a little bit more vulnerable when she's got her pants down in a stall and some dudes in the bathroom. That's it's a different sort of thing. So I think, listen, if a business wants to have a separate bathroom for transgender, totally fine. I don't care. But this idea, the thing is that they are tying funding to this, and so there is going to be a lot of social pressure. They're probably going to have assemblies where they tell the kids all how they have to talk and how they have to act and how they you must accept this situation. And, and of course they're not going to go into detail with the kids as to why. It's because, hey, Washington's been giving us a bunch of money and we want to continue to receive that money. So here's what you're going to do. They're never going to tell you that part.
Smart to include that in the social studies or politics classes for sure. Okay. I'm just dismayed that at a time of this emergency that we're in, I'm the only person that asked a question about SRS funding I waited to the end. I wasn't going to ask any questions. I waited to the end, and Cheryl Walker got her chance to admit 3 different things.
Right.
And none of them was about emergency funding for our emergency situation.
And that's a very interesting thing, and it proves what I have been saying and what we've been saying, is that these people, our commissioners, are deceitful. They are. This is an exercise of deceit. This not using funds that they could be using for funding the sheriff for that purpose. They do not even lobby the federal government for more SRS funds. All three of the commissioners should have led in that in this particular meeting. They should have said, "Hey, listen, we're in a dire straits situation here. We'd like to say to you." But there's an unspoken agreement, clearly, between these people that don't give us that. We want to drop off the cliff. We want things to be really, really bad. That's the only way we're going to force people to pull more money out of their own pockets and give it to us. And we will do wonderful and super duper things with it. You can trust us.
A little bit more from this fellow, and then a final question and answer.
You can't keep it and you watch. I can't wait for, I'm sorry if I sound a little partisan here, but I can't wait for this administration to go away, what they're doing with the Department of Labor, what they're doing in this case, on and on and on. And just doesn't feel like there's any local involvement or communication again. It's just top down. What's this going to cost? How's it going to be done? It's like, I can imagine a bunch of junior high boys that think it'd be a good thing to kind of think differently one day and go in the girls' locker room,
Exactly.
I'm just saying, I don't know, what do you say? What do you say on a deal like this? So, get me that. Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I'd like to thank you again for coming to this forum here. Questions I have are dealing with international terrorism. Our current administration seems to take the position of containment, where we just let them stay wherever they are and accept the fact that maybe 30,000, 40,000 people a year will be killed. And others believe in destroying them before they destroy us. And the other is our borders. Our current administration seems to accept open borders where we allow anybody and everybody in. And some people say to close the borders and only allow people in that we know of. I'd like to know your position on both of those.
Sure. Well, three of them. First of all, we have in law, including this last week, and as we're moving the new NDAA bill, National Defense Authorization Act, through, and the VA Milcom bill, first of all, in Gitmo, said no funds can be spent to transfer those prisoners out of Gitmo to the United States. We have documented evidence of where they've let them loose and they've gone out and killed Americans. These are not good people sitting in Gitmo. There's a reason they're there. They want to do harm to us and Westerners. So that's piece one. Two, there was a Supreme Court decision came down either yesterday or today that was very interesting on deportation on a 5-3 ruling, kind of mixed up the court. There was a decision in a case out of, I want to say, New York, a permanent resident got convicted under state law on an arson. And he, if I get this, I may get this a little wrong, but he petitioned and they came to deport him several years ago, and they said, no, you don't get to, because this wasn't one of the listed federal crimes. And so they said it has to be one of these federal crimes, and that's the nexus through the Constitution to interstate commerce, which, blah, blah, blah. The court came back 5-3 and said no. And so this guy who's been here since '99 is going to get deported for an arson conviction under state law. So this is a really interesting change, and it divided the court in an odd way. I think Kagan wrote the opinion. So that just happened. You have to read it, and I'll get deeper into it. Third, on border security, I'm all on board. A country that doesn't have control of its borders doesn't have control of its security. How hard is that to figure out? That doesn't, by the way, mean that you have to build a whatever-foot wall the entire length, because that doesn't make sense everywhere. There are better ways. Even Rick Perry, I remember watching, I was on 60 Minutes years ago, talking about here we do it with boats, there we do it with a wall, you can't really physically do it, here we do it with overhead. There are technological ways. The key is to get security. And I think that's important. And by the way, other countries are learning that in Europe. When you don't have good immigration flow management, And you can make the argument that this is a wonderful thing for Putin to stir up the Middle East, force destabilization in Turkey, and then on into Europe. I mean, geopolitically, that's to his advantage to have a bit destabilized Europe. Fourth, on ISIS, we called on the president to report to Congress on a plan to win this battle against ISIS and put statutory deadlines. We don't think he has a plan for success. And fifth, in the NDAA and all, we put an effort in here to go after ISIS, funding, everything we need to go after it, because we have to. These people are out to do us harm. If you have any question about that, let's talk. Because you look at San Bernardino, you look at Paris, you look at Brussels, other places in America, and we can't talk about the ones that we've disrupted that you don't know about, that I probably don't even know about, but it's happening all the time. We know there are hundreds of ISIS people that have left the U.S., gone into these war zones where they're training ISIS fighters and have come back. Sort of lone wolf thing. That's what I worry most about.
Mike?
Mm-hmm. This is interesting. It's not much of a local, relevance there. But so do you have where you can go up to the point where the SRS questions or whatever the closing question and answer thing?
Yes, I'm glad you asked.
Close to the end here.
Back to this side, yes.
We've heard one thing from one of the senators and another from you about the continuation of SRS payments, especially for Josephine County. A quarter of America's counties get SRS payments. Right. What is the prognosis, sir?
Well, I can tell you this, that I worked with former Speaker John Boehner 3 years ago, and he made a commitment to me for 1 year of extended funding. We found a way to pay for it, and I got him to go to 2 years. And so that's what we got done and sent over to the Senate. That became law, and that is the last payment that's now gone out the door. SRS is really important. I get that. I'm the only one in the delegation, by the way, that's actually voted for each bill because it's been shoved in other bills over time. That became law that funded SRS. So I worked on this my whole time there. We also, though, this has always been couched as, this is the last time because we're going to change this. This is a transition payment. We never get the forestry bill done. We never get the forestry legislation done. By the way, we have, $15 trillion in debt or whatever it is. We've got, a $500 billion debt this year, 400, 500 billion, whatever it is. And I have to go find some way to take something from another program to pay for SRS. So this is very different. I'm not alone. Others in the delegation worked on this too. I'm not throwing rocks here at all. It's very hard to find those pay-fors at a time when we're trying to ramp down discretionary spending. And so it's hard. And I'm such an advocate for better forest management and have put forward legislation that I can't get help on in the overall Senate that would replace the funding with real jobs and real revenue into perpetuity. But right now we go back and just punch the ATM machine and try and hope something comes out. They can't plan. I've had talks with commissioners all over the district who say, you rush in at the last minute after we tell our voters we're going broke, and then you give us a payment at the last minute and our voters go, see, you were lying again. Yep. And it is. And so I want to see us put the pressure on to get forestry.
Prognosis? Are we going to get?
We're working on it.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, you know what? The one thing that jumped out at me,
Sorry.
Yeah, very, very, very similar. The one thing that jumped out at me in that whole thing was him saying 15 trillion in debt or whatever it is. It's like 19, almost 20 trillion. The fact that he doesn't know that off the top of his head is not exactly inspire confidence.
Yeah, right. So I was kind of surprised that even during this, that he gave an answer that matched closer to Merkley than it did to our local commissioners.
Yeah, it did. I would have been interested to hear his response, and I guess this is why you need to go to these things. I wasn't totally up to it this morning. That I would have liked to hear his response to the question, hey, it's been said that you sort of have a deal going with commissioners around here not to say anything about SRS or give anybody any hope about any sort of government payments because these guys want to pass a levy. Can you speak to that? And
all three commissioners were there, so what do you think he would have answered? Why, I misinterpreted what I told the Daily Courier.
Well, yeah, but he did tell the Daily Courier that.
That's right. Yes,
I mean, it's bothersome that, listen, this goes back to the deceit thing, and it's very, very cryptic. But if you cannot tell your constituents the truth about the plan that you are implementing, then that is deceit. That is lying. That is not telling the truth to your constituents. In other words, you have a plan that what we're going to do is we're just going to bankrupt the county. Okay, we're going to make it so we don't have any resource at all at the end of the road here when we fall off the fiscal cliff and they don't give us SRS. If that does come to pass, that gives them the avenue to do pretty much whatever they want. They're going to have a bunch of people who really will be consumed with fear at that point. I won't be because, I live in a place where, the sheriff's department doesn't come anywhere near where I live. This is not really going to make a difference because the people that live around here are all fairly law-abiding, decent people. But people that live in population centers like Grants Pass and Cape Junction are going to freak out. And that's exactly what they want them to do so that they can get past what they want to get past so that they can get more money from us to do their good works. And it was interesting. This morning I was watching, I going through my news feed on Facebook, and some video of Kanye West on the Ellen DeGeneres show. And she asked him the question about, and if you're not into pop culture, you probably haven't heard this, but he apparently is not very good with money, and he asked Mark Zuckerberg for $53 million, to help him pay off his debts. And so she asked him about that, and he goes into this long-winded explanation that, he's had conversations with Mark Zuckerberg about how if he had more resources, he could really do great things for society and help people, in their lives. Their lives could be a whole lot better if the people would just give me money so that I could execute my ideas, my altruistic ideas. And this is exactly what government does.
Yes.
They say, I've got a great plan, and my plan is going to make everything fantastic. All you got to do is give me some of your money. And here's how much money I want. And I want this much, but I'll settle for this much. This is what they do. And they're just as credible in this claim as Kanye West is.
Well, that's what the sheriff said to me yesterday morning in the hallway. He's walking by, and those of you who watched yesterday's show know this already. He's walking by, and he makes some little comment to me like, well, it's just too bad that the people don't vote to give more money to the juvenile shelter, juvenile detention. And I said, it's just too bad that the sheriff doesn't stand up and ask for money for this emergency situation.
Yeah, I think he was probably actually referring to the measure that was on the ballot about giving a nickel per thousand or something like that to, put these retired deputies in the schools. But the point is still the same.
If I had caught on that that's what he meant, I could just as easily turn around and say, why don't you use some of those retired officers that are good enough to protect our children with guns, run through your office? Why don't you put them out on the street to protect the rest of us?
Amen. Yeah.
Well, you got to think fast because in the hallway, you're only going to have a few seconds, and good luck to everybody that thought that through and knew that's what they should have said to the sheriff while he was still in the hallway. Yeah.
Right, of course.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. I think it was kind of interesting to watch. The questions were more interesting to me than the kind of blathery answers, but you might disagree, and that's okay. You can be wrong.
Oh, no, I don't. Not at all.
I didn't mean you. I meant our audience.
Oh.
All right, feel free. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll have another scintillating show tomorrow night.